may have already heard, but in case you missed it, the news that has really taken the landscape by storm over the past week and a half or so is that Aeroplan and Etihad Airways are now partners, and you can now redeem Aeroplan miles on Etihad Airways flights in economy, business, and first class. I mean, on one hand, we've got Aeroplan, our cute, humble Canadian loyalty program with its cheerful orange demeanor and its rickety old online search engine. And on the other hand, we've got Etihad Airways from the United Arab Emirates, first class apartments Etihad, A380 Etihad, shower in the sky Etihad, onboard lounge Etihad, world class food and drink Etihad. It's unbelievable. I almost need a little bit more time to fully digest this news. So in the meantime, if you're enjoying these videos, if you think I do a good job of covering the credit cards and the loyalty programs, or if you're just really jumping for joy at this new Aeroplan and Etihad partnership, then feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to the Prince of Travel YouTube channel. It really helps me out. It really tells YouTube that I'm doing a good job, and it encourages them to share the video with even more users, especially if you like and subscribe right now just as the video started. And with that said, let's get right into it. Alright guys, so this video is going to go a little something like this. We're going to start by hyping up the new Aeroplan and Etihad partnership. We're going to explain exactly why it deserves to be hyped up. And then we're going to talk about the best redemption opportunities on Etihad Airways, some of the best sweet spots, the methodology for getting into the redemptions and for booking the Etihad flights for yourself. And then we're going to end with a few caveats, a few things to be aware of as you're looking to book Etihad Airways on Aeroplan, and about the future of the Aeroplan program in general. So first of all, why is the addition of Etihad Airways as a brand new Aeroplan partner such an exciting development for Aeroplan members? Well, it all boils down to the fact that the United Arab Emirates' flag carrier is widely considered one of the world's best airlines. It has a very competitive product in economy class, a beautiful business class product known as the Etihad Business Studio, and of course the famous Airbus A380 first class apartments where there's a single aisle in the first class cabin, and it's a very intimate first class cabin with only 9 first class suites in total. And on top of that, there's the shower in the sky, there's the onboard bar and lounge, and there's the world-class food and drink that you enjoy on board. And those Airbus A380 first-class apartments is exactly what I believe has captured the imagination of most Aeroplan members. Because we've all seen pictures of the famous first-class product, but nowadays when you can redeem Aeroplan miles according to the same published fixed chart as the rest of the Star Alliance partners for a flight on the Etihad apartments with no fuel surcharges, that's obviously a huge win for any member who has Aeroplan miles. And it is that ability to very easily redeem Aeroplan miles for Etihad First Class that makes me think that this development is transformative and groundbreaking and almost a game changer for the entire Aeroplan program. And to understand why, let's ask ourselves the question, what is the mark of a truly outstanding sweet spot within a loyalty program? Right? What distinguishes the sweet spots that everybody knows about, everybody dreams of when they first start collecting points from the rest of the sweet spots out there? And if I were to answer that question, I would say that for a sweet spot in which you use a certain type of miles to book a certain type of flight, for that sweet spot to be one of the best out there, then the type of miles you're using has to be one of the best ways, most easily accessible ways to book the flight in question. And booking the flight in question must represent one of the best uses of the miles that you're using. So not only does it have to be, optimal in one direction, but it has to be optimal the other way around as well. It has to be mutually optimal. And I would argue that that's exactly the case with Aeroplan miles and Etihad Airways First Class. Not only do Aeroplan miles now represent the best way for Canadian travelers to book Etihad First Class and the Etihad apartments, but so too do Etihad First Class and the Etihad apartments now represent the single most valuable usage of your Aeroplan miles that you can possibly redeem for. If we think about the first half of that statement, well, before this new Aeroplan partnership, Etihad First Class was always quite tough to book because you had to go through programs like American A Advantage, Etihad Guest, or Asiana Airlines Asiana Club. And it was never really easy to earn miles in these programs, and sometimes you would have to pay very high fuel surcharges as well. So now that we have the Aeroplan partnership, it's super easy to earn Aeroplan miles in Canada with the American Express, TD, and CIBC credit cards, with the Aeroplan e-store, and with Aeroplan's promotions. And there's no fuel surcharges that you pay when you redeem Aeroplan miles on Etihad. So that's obviously now the best way, the easiest way to book the Etihad apartments for yourself. And on the other side of the coin, if we think about the second half of that statement, well, ask yourselves, what were some of the best uses of Aeroplan miles prior to this? Well, you could always book business class many around the world. You could always book special experiences like Lufthansa First Class or ANA First Class, but none of those were perhaps quite as aspirational as the Etihad apartments and Etihad Airways First Class, which is, almost in a league of its own, along with Emirates and Singapore Airlines. And especially when you factor in things like the relatively generous amount of award seats that Etihad makes available in first class, the fact that you can redeem for no fuel surcharges, the fact that you can combine Etihad flights with other Star Alliance flights on the same award, and of course some of the redemption sweet spots that we're going to talk about later in the video, then this truly is a game changer for your Aeroplan miles, and I think it's going to be a very, very popular redemption among Aeroplan members. So that is, in a nutshell, why this new Aeroplan and Etihad partnership is such a match made in heaven, a matrimony of the highest order. And without further ado, let's dive into all of the details on redeeming Aeroplan miles for Etihad flights so that you can try it out for yourself. Let's talk a little bit about the Etihad Airways route network. Now, Etihad is a relatively young airline, having only been founded in 2003. Based out of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, it serves 74 destinations around the world across 5 of the 6 inhabited continents. In North America, the airline serves 5 destinations with direct flights, 4 in the US, LAX, Washington, D.C., New York JFK, and Chicago, and 1 in Canada, Toronto Pearson. So if you don't live in one of these 5 cities, then you may need to add on a separate flight, whether it's on Air Canada or United or a different airline, to get to the Gateway Airport and catch your Etihad flight. And around the world, Etihad Airways has a route network that potentially could be beefed up a little in certain areas, but is nonetheless still very comprehensive overall. Some of the most popular destinations might include London, Paris, Frankfurt, or Istanbul in Europe, Seychelles, Johannesburg, or Nairobi in Africa, Beijing, Hong Kong, Seoul, Tokyo, or Singapore in Asia, or Sydney and Melbourne in Australia as well. And the airline also has very good coverage of India and the Indian subcontinent in general, as well as throughout the Middle East. Now, something else that we must familiarize ourselves with about the Etihad route network is where does the airline fly their fleet of 10 Airbus A380s? Because it's only on the Airbus A380, the world's largest plane, on the top deck that Etihad has the famous first class apartments with the huge individual suite, the shower in the sky, and the onboard lounge. And as of right now, Etihad is using the Airbus A380 on 5 different routes: Abu Dhabi to New York JFK, London Heathrow, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Seoul Incheon, and Sydney, Australia. So that means that if you live in North America, then the flight that you really want to book is the flight out of or into New York JFK, because that's the only one that's going to have the Airbus A380 first class apartments. The other flights out of North America are still going to be very special business class or first class experiences, but perhaps not quite on the same level as the apartments, without the same kind of wow factor. Anyway, now that we've gone over the available routes, let's think about the redemption possibilities, and in particular the redemption price points, because there are some very interesting redemption price points available here. Let's pull up the Aeroplan reward chart and take a look. If we consider the most basic first class flight that you could book, let's say New York JFK to Abu Dhabi, then we see that that falls into Canada and continental USA to Middle East and North Africa. And that costs 230,000 miles for a round trip in first class, which is equivalent to 115,000 miles one way. But the very interesting thing here is that if we now think about a redemption between Canada and the continental USA and Australia, New Zealand, and South Pacific, that actually clocks in at only 220,000 miles first class round trip, which is the same as 110,000 miles for a one-way in first class. So the kind of crazy thing is booking a simple flight from JFK to Abu Dhabi is actually one of the more expensive redemptions that you can make. And you can actually add a whole 14-hour flight after that over to Sydney, Australia, and you would actually save 5,000 miles by doing so. Just think about that for a second. By adding a 14-hour flight in first class to your itinerary that would ordinarily cost almost $10,000 alone, you actually save 5,000 miles. You're basically getting paid to fly an extra 14 hours in first class, from JFK to Abu Dhabi to Sydney, instead of just from JFK to Abu Dhabi. It's a classic example of award chart arbitrage, and indeed it's proven very popular with Aeroplan members, with tons of members, including yours truly, having booked this JFK Abu Dhabi Sydney flight or the opposite way around for 110,000 Aeroplan miles plus about $150 in taxes and fees. And that's of course a spectacular deal. Now, in terms of actually making a booking, some Etihad flights will show up on the online search engine when you search for a one-way journey, but not all of them will. So for example, when you search JFK to Sydney, you might not see the Etihad First Class flights through Abu Dhabi showing up in the search results. So you're going to need to call Aeroplan to book those more complex itineraries. I found that the most reliable way to search for Etihad First Class availability is actually not to go through the Aeroplan search engine itself, but instead to go through Expert Flyer or the Etihad Guest search engine. And the award space that you see through these two sources more closely aligns with what the call center with Aeroplan agents can actually see and book on their end. And speaking of the Aeroplan call center, now's the point in the video where I want to mention some caveats to expect when you're making your Etihad First Class booking and when you're dealing with Aeroplan and making Aeroplan bookings in general. If you've tried to make a complex booking through the Aeroplan call center over the past 2 or 3 weeks, there's been a bit of a problem, a mishap, or a debacle depending on how you look at it. And it relates to a little known part of how the Aeroplan loyalty program works, known as the maximum permitted mileage, or MPM. Now, we've covered the MPM before here on the channel. Basically, a rule that's supposed to limit how far you can fly between two cities, how convoluted your routing may be. Aeroplan has assigned to every pair of cities around the world a certain maximum permitted mileage figure. And while they don't publish that figure publicly, there is a way to figure it out. But in case you needed a refresher for the concept, the MPM is basically a number given to every city pair within the Aeroplan system, such that for any one-way booking between these two city pairs, the total distance flown on whatever flights you book between these two cities cannot be over the MPM, the maximum permitted mileage. So the MPM number has historically been quite generous, but about 2 or 3 weeks ago, some people over the phone have been told that the MPM is now a much lower number. It now aligns with the MPM that you might find when you search through Expert Flyer, which is significantly lower than what it used to be through Aeroplan. And if the MPM was truly lowered across the board, then it would take a lot of value out of the Aeroplan program, because it would be a lot harder to customize your route on the exact flights and the exact business class products and first class products that you want as you're trying to get to your final destination. And it would also be a lot tougher to build in your ideal stopovers on your way to your final destination, as well as any long layovers, any 23-hour layovers that you want to slot in the middle. Now, here's the problem. I was obviously very concerned when I heard about these potential changes to the MPM. I mean, the MPM has always been kind of hidden in the Aeroplan program. It's never been openly published or disclosed. If you look through the terms and conditions, you'll see that there's no mention of a maximum permitted mileage at all. So really, Aeroplan could choose to change this number and not announce it or disclose it at all, and it would kind of be a subtle or stealth devaluation that was still very much within the limits of the program itself. So I was obviously very concerned, and I reached out to my Aeroplan contacts to see if there had been a change to the MPM. But they replied saying that there had been no change to the MPM rules surrounding the flight rewards. So what gives? I mean, on one hand, there's been no official change to the MPM rules, but on the other hand, there's been a lot of Aeroplan members who've been calling into the call center, especially when they're trying to book these new Etihad Airways flights, and being told that their previously valid itineraries are no longer valid because they're over the allowed maximum permitted mileage. So when people try to book Sydney, Abu Dhabi, New York, JFK for 110,000 miles, for example, some of them are being told that it's not valid, that you can't book it, whereas other members are actually being allowed to book and are being helped very enthusiastically by the agents to book these trips. and it seems to depend entirely on which agent you're connected with when you call Aeroplan. And this situation obviously doesn't make any sense at all, so I've actually followed up with my Aeroplan contact. I've sent them a long-winded email for some clarity on what's going on with the MPM situation, and they've said that it may take a while to get back to me because the team needs to investigate. So obviously, when I do hear back, you can expect to hear what are the latest updates on the MPM situation on the channel or over on princeoftravel.com. But in the meantime, if you're trying to book an Etihad Airways flight through the Aeroplan call center, especially if it's one of the more interesting sweet spots like that Sydney, Abu Dhabi, New York, JFK for 110,000 miles, then be prepared to call back, hang up and call back a few times, because you need to find the right agent who will help you make that booking instead of just putting on a terrible attitude and saying, sorry, that's not possible, it's against the rules. And finally, I want to end this video with a little bit of a reminder to you guys about the general state of the Aeroplan program now that this very welcome news of the Etihad Airways partnership has arrived. As we know, Air Canada will be launching a brand new version of the Aeroplan program later on this year, currently slated for Q4 of 2020. And it makes perfect sense that they're trying to hype up the program as much as possible in the lead up to the new program's launch. This new Etihad Airways partnership is obviously an incredible development, and it really makes me think that we're currently in the golden age of Aeroplan miles. And in general, things may not quite be as good as they are right now, especially as we go many years into the future of the new program. Right now, we're able to combine Etihad flights with a relatively generous published fixed award chart for international premium flights. Now, in the future, when the new Aeroplan program launches, we know there's still going to be a published award chart, but we don't know what those award rates are going to be. And it's quite likely, if you ask me, that those rates are going to go up in the future. After all, we know that across the industry, loyalty programs generally devalue over time, and the Aeroplan award chart has remained fixed at its current levels for the past 5 years or so. So it's kind of ripe for a little bit of a devaluation, if you ask me. Now, I'm not saying that the award rates are definitely going to go up, but I'm saying that if they do go up, don't be surprised. So right now, in this current moment, we really have the best of both worlds. We have Air Canada improving the program, hyping up the program, adding exciting new partners like Etihad Airways, and we have a relatively generous existing award chart to work with. And I'm sure that many of us hope that this award chart will remain generous in the future, but we also have some degree of healthy skepticism about what's going to happen with the new program. So what I'm saying is, right now is the golden ages for Aeroplan miles, and if you want to maximize your value, now's the time to make some epic redemptions on Etihad Airways for travel later on in 2020, or perhaps more likely sometime in 2021. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. I hope you've enjoyed the video because we've covered some very exciting developments for Aeroplan members. And I'm sure many of you will be looking at your next Etihad Airways redemptions if you haven't already soon after watching the video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the Prince of Travel YouTube channel. Just click the subscribe button below the video. And do share with me in the comments what's your take on this new Aeroplan and Etihad partnership. Are you about to book some epic flights on the Etihad First Class apartments? And do you think Aeroplan is on its way to becoming a program of global prominence? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. So in this video, let's break down... Wait, Jesse! Don't make noise. You know this is going in the outtakes. Let's take a look at the Etihad route. Jesse, do you say route or route?
I say route.
Do Canadians say route?